My grandmother demanded that I bear my dead grandfather's child. She had frozen his sperm and threatened to disown me if I refused. I thought the hardest part about losing Grandpa Robert was over. It had been 3 months since his funeral, 3 months since we buried the man who taught me how to drive stick shift, who took me fishing every summer, and who always slipped me $20 bills when Grandma Eleanor wasn't looking. I was finally starting to feel normal again. Then Grandma called a family meeting. "Madison, darling, please sit down," Eleanor said as I entered the formal dining room of her Beacon Hill townhouse. At 72, my grandmother was still an imposing woman, perfectly coiffed silver hair, designer clothes, and the kind of stern expression that had kept 3 generations of Blackwells in line. My parents, David and Susan, were already seated at the mahogany table that had hosted countless family dinners. Dad looked uncomfortable in his rarely worn suit, while Mom kept fidgeting with her pearls. Something was definitely off. "What's this about, Grandma?" I asked, settling into my usual chair. The late October sun was streaming through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the room where Grandpa used to tell his stories about building his car dealership empire from nothing. "It's about your grandfather's legacy," Eleanor said, her voice crisp and businesslike, "and your role in preserving it." I glanced at my parents, but they were both staring at their hands. Dad's construction business had been struggling since the housing market downturn, and I knew they'd been worried about money. Mom had even started talking about going back to work as a teacher after 15 years of being a stay-at-home mom. "Before Robert passed," Eleanor continued, "he and I had many discussions about the future of our family, about ensuring the Blackwell name continues. Grandma, I'm only 24. I just graduated from Emerson College. I'm not ready to think about kids yet." Eleanor's smile was thin and calculating. "That's where you're wrong, dear. You're going to think about it right now." She stood up and walked to the antique sideboard, retrieving a manila folder that looked suspiciously official. My stomach started doing flip-flops. 3 months before your grandfather died, when the doctors told us the cancer was spreading, Robert made a decision. He had his sperm frozen at Boston IVF Clinic. The words hit me like a physical blow. He what? He wanted to ensure that the Blackwell bloodline could continue, even after his death. "And Madison, you're going to be the one to carry his child." The room went completely silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, the same clock that Grandpa had wound every Sunday morning for as long as I could remember. That's insane," I stammered. "Grandma, you can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." Eleanor opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "I've already spoken with Dr. Martinez at the fertility clinic. The procedure can be scheduled as early as next month." I looked desperately at my parents. "Mom? Dad? You're going to let her say this crazy stuff?" Mom finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "Madison, honey, maybe you should hear her out." "Hear her out? She wants me to have a baby with my dead grandfather's sperm. This is beyond sick." Eleanor slammed her hand on the table, making everyone jump. "Robert Blackwell built this family from nothing. He started with one used car lot in Southie and turned it into 12 dealerships across New England. He worked 70-hour weeks so that all of us could have better lives. And now he's gone, and there's no one to carry on his name." "What about Dad? What about his name?" "Your father," Eleanor said coldly, "has proven himself incapable of maintaining the family legacy. His construction business is failing. He's mortgaged his house twice. Without my financial support, your parents would be homeless within 6 months." I felt like I was drowning. "What are you saying?" Eleanor sat back down, her expression softening into what she probably thought was grandmotherly concern. "I'm saying that this family needs you, Madison. Your grandfathers will left everything to me, the dealerships, the investments, this house, everything. I have complete control over the Blackwell fortune. So, I'm prepared to make you an offer. Bear Robert's child, and I'll set up a trust fund that will make you financially secure for life. Your parents' debts will be paid off. Your future will be guaranteed." The room was spinning. "And if I refuse?" Eleanor's mask slipped completely. "Then you'll be cut off entirely. No more help with your student loans. No more family support. Your parents will lose their house, and you'll all learn what it's like to live without Blackwell money. I looked at my parents again, and this time I saw the truth in their faces. They were desperate. Dad's construction company wasn't just struggling, it was dying. Mom looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. How much do they owe? I asked quietly. $250,000, Eleanor said matter-of-factly. Credit cards, business loans, the second mortgage. All of it could disappear with one phone call from me. Madison, we never wanted you to find out like this, Dad said, his voice barely above a whisper. The business? I made some bad decisions. Trusted the wrong people. We're in real trouble. I felt sick. My whole life, I'd thought we were just a normal upper-middle-class family. Dad's construction business was successful, Mom stayed home, and we lived comfortably in our suburban Newton house. But apparently, it had all been built on borrowed money and Grandma's generosity. This is emotional blackmail, I said. This is family, Eleanor replied. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the people we love. What about what I want? What about my life, my plans, my career? You can still have a career. The trust fund will give you the freedom to pursue whatever you want without worrying about money. And think about it, Madison. This child would be part of your grandfather. A piece of him that would live on. I stood up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. This is insane. I'm not some broodmare for your sick fantasies about preserving bloodlines. And even if I wanted to do this, which I absolutely don't, it's creepy and unethical and probably illegal. It's perfectly legal, Eleanor said calmly. I've already consulted with 3 different lawyers. Posthumous conception is more common than you might think. I need air, I said, heading for the door. Madison, wait. Mom called after me. But I was already running down the hall, past the family photos that lined the walls, pictures of Grandpa at various dealership openings, family vacations, graduations. In every single photo, he was smiling that warm, genuine smile that had made me feel so loved and protected. Now that smile felt tainted. I made it to my car before the tears started. Sitting in the driveway of the house where I'd spent countless childhood afternoons, I tried to process what had just happened. My grandmother wanted me to have a baby with my dead grandfather's sperm. My parents were broke and desperate, and somehow I was supposed to solve everyone's problems by agreeing to the most disturbing request I'd ever heard. I pulled out my phone and called my best friend Jenna. Madison, how did the family meeting go? Did your grandmother finally give you access to your trust fund? Jenna, I said, my voice shaking. I need to see you. Right now. And you're not going to believe what just happened. As I drove toward Cambridge, where Jenna was finishing her master's degree at Harvard, I couldn't stop thinking about Grandpa. About the man I'd idolized my entire life. About the fishing trips where he'd taught me that integrity was the most important thing a person could have. What would he think about what Eleanor was asking me to do? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? Because one thing was becoming crystal clear. This wasn't really about preserving his legacy at all. This was about something much darker, and I was starting to suspect that I didn't really know my family as well as I thought I did. 3 days later, I was sitting across from Dr. Sarah Chen, a therapist who specialized in family trauma, trying to explain the most bizarre situation of my life. So, your grandmother is essentially using your parents' financial desperation to coerce you into posthumous conception? Dr. Chen asked, her expression carefully neutral. That's the simplified version, yes. Madison, what you're describing is a form of reproductive coercion. It's a type of abuse that... But what if she's right? I interrupted. What if my family really does need me to do this? My parents could lose everything. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. Let me ask you something. If your parents weren't in financial trouble, would you even consider this request? God, no. It's disturbing on like 15 different levels. Then their financial situation doesn't make it less disturbing. It just makes your grandmother's manipulation more effective. That hit me like a slap. For the past 3 days, I'd been torturing myself trying to figure out if there was some scenario where Eleanor's demand made sense. But Dr. Chen was right, I was only considering it because of the emotional blackmail. I've been doing some research, I said, pulling out my phone. Posthumous conception isn't that uncommon, but most cases involve widows who want to have their deceased husband's children. This situation, I can't find anything like it. What have you found? Horror stories, mostly. Cases where family members fought over frozen embryos. Women who were pressured into pregnancies they didn't want. And Madison, I paused, looking at the notes I'd taken. I found something else. Something about my family. After leaving Dr. Chen's office, I'd made a decision. If Eleanor wanted to play hardball with my future, I was going to find out exactly what I was dealing with. I'd started with public records. The Blackwell family business empire that Eleanor was so proud of? It wasn't actually that impressive. 12 car dealerships across New England sounds like a lot until you realize that several of them were barely profitable. Grandpa Robert had been a good man and a decent businessman, but he wasn't the empire-building genius Eleanor made him out to be. More importantly, I'd found something that Eleanor definitely hadn't mentioned. Dr. Chen, my grandfather had other grandchildren. Her eyebrows raised. Other grandchildren? My dad has a brother, Uncle Michael, who moved to California 20 years ago. I barely remember him from when I was little. But he has 2 kids, my cousins Jake and Ashley. They're both older than me. Did your grandmother mention them when she made her demand? Not once. It was all about me being the only one who could carry on the family name. But that's not true. Jake is 28 and married. Ashley is 30 and has 2 kids of her own, kids who already carry the Blackwell name. Dr. Chen made a note. Have you contacted them? I called Jake yesterday. Dr. Chen, the conversation was illuminating. Flashback to phone call. Madison? Wow, I haven't heard from you in years. How are you holding up after Grandpa Robert's death? That's actually why I'm calling, Jake. Did Grandma Eleanor contact you or Ashley about anything unusual? There was a long pause. She called me about 2 weeks ago, offered me a significant amount of money to move back to Boston and rejoin the family business. What did you tell her? I told her the same thing I told her 15 years ago when she demanded I break up with my girlfriend because she wasn't suitable for a Blackwell. I told her to go to hell. She tried to control your relationships? Madison, Eleanor Blackwell is a master manipulator. She drove my dad away from the family because he wouldn't let her run his life. She tried to control who I dated, what college I went to, what career I chose. When I finally told her I was done with her games, she cut us off completely. But your grandpa's grandsons. Why didn't she ask you to? Never mind, this is too weird to explain over the phone. Try me. So I told him. Everything. When I finished, Jake was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. Jake? Are you there? I'm here. Madison, listen to me very carefully. Get away from her. Whatever she's offering, whatever she's threatening, get away from Eleanor and don't look back. But my parents are grown adults who made their own financial decisions. Madison, what Eleanor is asking you to do, it's not about preserving Grandpa's legacy. It's about control. It's about owning you completely. Back in Dr. Chen's office. Your cousin sounds like he has experience with your grandmother's manipulation tactics, Dr. Chen observed. There's more. Jake told me that when he was in college, Eleanor offered to pay for his entire education, but only if he agreed to major in business and come work for Grandpa after graduation. When he chose engineering instead, she cut off all financial support. A pattern of using money to control family members. Exactly. And when I asked him about Ashley, he said Eleanor had done something similar to her. Ashley wanted to be a social worker, but Eleanor said it wasn't a respectable career for a Blackwell woman. When Ashley went ahead with it anyway, Eleanor stopped inviting her to family events. I looked down at my hands. Dr. Chen, I don't think I ever really knew my grandmother at all. What do you mean? Growing up, she was always particular. Everything had to be perfect. The right clothes, the right manners, the right friends. But I thought that was just her being old-fashioned. I didn't realize she was actually trying to control every aspect of our lives. And your grandfather? How did he fit into this dynamic? That was the question I'd been avoiding. I think I think Grandpa might have been just as controlled as the rest of us. He always deferred to her on family decisions, always backed down when she got that look in her eyes. Dr. Chin nodded. In many controlling relationships, the victim learns to avoid conflict by going along with increasingly unreasonable demands. So, what Eleanor is asking me to do, it might not even be what Grandpa would have wanted? What do you think? I closed my eyes and tried to remember my grandfather as he really was, not as Eleanor's carefully constructed mythology portrayed him. He'd been kind, generous, and patient. But he'd also been quiet around Eleanor, careful not to upset her, always checking with her before making plans or decisions. I think my grandfather was probably miserable, I said quietly. And I think Eleanor is so desperate to maintain control over this family that she's willing to traumatize me to do it. What are you going to do? I'd been dreading that question, but suddenly, the answer was clear. I'm going to tell her no. And then I'm going to help my parents figure out their financial problems without selling my reproductive future to a manipulative old woman. That evening, back at Eleanor's house. Madison, darling, I'm so glad you called. Have you made your decision? I looked around the formal living room where Eleanor had summoned me. Everything was pristine, expensive, and cold, just like her. I have. The answer is no. Eleanor's smile faltered. I beg your pardon? I said no. I'm not going to have a baby with Grandpa's frozen sperm. I'm not going to let you use my body to fulfill some sick fantasy about controlling your family from beyond the grave. Madison, you're being dramatic. This is about you being unable to accept that you can't control everyone around you anymore. Grandpa is gone. Uncle Michael moved across the country to get away from you. My cousins refused to have anything to do with you. And now you're trying to use my parents' financial problems to force me into the most disturbing arrangement I've ever heard of. Eleanor's face was turning red. How dare you speak to me that way? After everything this family has given you. What has this family given me? A childhood where I was constantly afraid of disappointing you? Parents who are so terrified of your disapproval that they can't even protect their own daughter from your manipulations. I stood up, surprised by how calm I felt. I talked to Jake and Ashley, by the way. I know about how you drove Uncle Michael away. I know about how you tried to control their education and careers. This isn't about family legacy, Eleanor. This is about you being a bully. If you walk out of here, you'll get nothing. Nothing. Your parents will lose their house, and you'll be saddled with student loan debt for the rest of your life. Then I guess I'll learn to live without Blackwell money. Plenty of people do just fine without trust funds and family connections. I headed for the door, but Eleanor's voice stopped me. He wanted this, Madison. Robert wanted this child. I turned back, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. Did he? Or did you convince him he wanted it while he was dying and scared and probably on a lot of pain medication? Eleanor's silence was answer enough. I'll help my parents figure out their debt, I said. We'll get financial counseling, maybe Dad can sell the business, maybe Mom can go back to teaching. We'll figure it out as a family, a real family that doesn't manipulate each other. Madison, please. Goodbye, Eleanor. I hope someday you realize that love isn't supposed to come with conditions. 3 months later, Mom did go back to teaching. Dad sold his struggling construction business and took a job with a larger company. It wasn't easy and we had to make a lot of changes, but we were managing. More importantly, we were talking to each other honestly for the first time in years. Turns out, Dad had been hiding the financial problems because he was ashamed. Mom had been pretending everything was fine because she didn't want to add to his stress. And I had been so focused on making everyone proud that I'd never stopped to consider what I actually wanted for my life. Eleanor tried calling a few times, but I didn't answer. Eventually, the calls stopped. I heard through Mom that she'd hired a private investigator to try to track down Uncle Michael's family in California. Apparently, she was now focused on convincing Jake or Ashley to move back to Boston and take over the family business. I wished them luck in dealing with her, but I was done. I got a job at a marketing firm in downtown Boston. It didn't pay much, but it was mine. I was building something that belonged to me, not something that came with strings attached. And sometimes, when I drove past one of Grandpa's old car dealerships, I like to think that he would have been proud of me for standing up to Eleanor. After all, he taught me that integrity was the most important thing a person could have. I just never realized he'd been trying to teach me how to use it against his own wife.